Black Myth Wukong is one of the most annoying games I've ever played. The game starts off decent enough. After a brief tutorial section, you take control of the Destined One, who sets off into a beautiful forest during Chapter 1, and it showcases a lot of really impressive sound design and effects, and the story slowly starts to unravel itself. And the basic takeaway is that ever since Sun Wukong's defeat centuries earlier, everything's kind of become corrupted or atrophied, and now we have to set the cycle anew. The most obvious problem with the story is that unless you've done the required reading of Journey to the West or are somehow intimately familiar with the characters, why certain characters do certain things or reference events that happen off-screen or in the past, it's really unclear what any of the characters' motivations are besides the Destined One, who just simply seeks to collect all of the Sun Wukong relics. At one point, a boss says something like, "Enter my sack and obtain enlightenment," and it's like, nah bro, I'm good. But in all seriousness, I realize that as a Westerner who has had Journey to the West on my reading backlog for years at this point, and whose familiarity with that material is limited to another derivative work in that of Dragon Ball, my ignorance is my own fault, but would it really have been that difficult for the developers to include an extra sentence or two explaining what's going on during the already long cutscenes? And I get that the game is trying to do the whole environmental storytelling thing as well, but that's very antithetical to a game like this that is pretty narratively driven. So to me, Black Myth Wukong is a game of extremes, and I think that is fitting because Sun Wukong and the Destined One are both pretty polarizing in just about everything they do. Another example of this is how, while the environments are large and convey the grandiose nature of the Destined One's adventure, the zones themselves are actually pretty empty, and Chapters 3 and Chapter 5 especially showcase this because, sure, there's a random enemy here or a mushroom to collect over there, but they're really just either snow or rock, and it's not especially interesting to look at all. Contrast this with Chapter 1, which, as I said earlier, is very pleasing on the eyes, and the graphics are quite impressive, admittedly, but all of these areas are just still plagued by an absurd amount of invisible walls, and the thing is, there are hidden paths with missables, so it is tiring to see from a distance what looks to be like a pathway, only to discover that, nope, not this time. Now, let me get to the gameplay, because this is important. Anything other than a tank and spank, the game starts to show problems after the first several hours. And usually the larger the enemy or the boss is, the more bizarre their hitboxes are, and ranged and flying enemies have a similar issue too. Seriously, if I see the Destined One's staff no-clip an enemy or one of its meaty bits, why is the game not registering as if I hit its hurt box? And on the topic of enemies, many of the levels just have obnoxious enemy placement. It's usually the ranged enemies, but also the flyers as well, especially in that stupid pagoda level. Seriously, that pagoda level is so bad, and it brings this game down a full letter grade, because the one time invisible walls should be implemented, hey, they're not there, and so the Destined One will absolutely plummet to his death, or even worse, have to backtrack. So anyway, you finally drag yourself to Chapter 6, and it's actually bad. So you've unlocked the ability to fly freely, and it's a giant map, so you think, wow, the game's really going to open up here. And unfortunately, of course, that doesn't happen. It's just another giant empty map with a handful of bosses scattered in between the areas. Oh, but thankfully, at least there's no QuickTime events in this game. Well, just kidding, the cricket boss encounter is a giant QuickTime event, so never mind. And on the topic of bosses, because there are many, almost every time I encountered a new one, this game somehow found a new way to include some bad or questionable design in it. I just didn't want to have to restat myself every single time. I just didn't want to have to do more menu jumping to be effective against a single enemy that has just arbitrarily decided to be immune to every other tool or skill that I've spent hours before honing. If I don't want to use thrust stance, or if I don't want to use pillar stance, why is the game almost forcing me to do so to cheese this one boss? And I get that it was probably some big brain developer's idea to have it, that when a spell is interrupted to both be not casted and to be put on cooldown as, you know, an element of strategy behind this game, but it's really just stupid and annoying. I also want to talk briefly about the game from a technical and performance perspective. I played this on the Xbox Series X, so the game had more than a full year for the developers to iron out any of the bugs or the kinks left over, but I still had at least a dozen or so times where bosses in particular just would not take damage in one of the clips that you'll see here, for example. Camera angles are just wonky and awful at many points, and especially if the Destined One gets pushed into a corner or tossed into a small space. I also had several hard crashes, and the game has long load times to boot. And also, why are some of the cutscenes skippables but others aren't? As a side note, I was stunned as I was playing through Black Myth Wukong that this game was nominated for Game of the Year in 2024. So out of curiosity, I looked at the statistics for the PlayStation Trophy and the Steam achievements for players reaching certain milestones in the game. And oh boy, was I not surprised by what I discovered. Generally speaking, less than 50% of the players who played Black Myth Wukong even got through halfway through the game, and even less than a third even completed the game at all. So how can these people even be eligible to say a game is a candidate for Game of the Year if they didn't even finish the game that they're trying to show for? Well, that's just the era that we live in now, where the collective brains of gamers so-called are so dopamine fried by the kid slop or the low IQ garbage like COD, Valorant, or Fortnite that a game like this that might hold their attention for more than a round's worth and might actually look really pretty for the first hour is somehow a Game of the Year. Well, whatever. Anyway, in the end, my experience with Black Myth Wukong was that the more and more I played the game, the more and more the honeymoon phase disappeared, revealing that the game is really not that great. The level design and the boss design left a lot to be desired from a AAA developer. So having found this one to be overrated and overhyped, I'm giving Black Myth Wukong a B-/C+. Better luck next time, Sun Wukong.